This is Jed Disler, and welcome to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. I wanted to talk about the Hungarian pianist Geza Anda, who lived from 1914 until 1976. He made many outstanding studio recordings, primarily for the EMI label in the early 1950s, and his studio recordings continued throughout the 1960s for Deutsche Grammophon. He did a few things in the 70s as well, but his recording activity really dropped in the 70s. He was the first pianist to record Mozart's complete piano concertos conducting from the piano, and his cycle of the Bartók concertos conducted by Ferenc Fricksoy was a long-time version of reference. This was on Deutsche Grammophon. His Bartók concertos, I think, were only superseded later on by the Zoltán Kocsis versions, but the Anda versions are still really quite wonderful. To my ears, Geza Anda was primarily a pianist who was more about details and nuances than the big overall picture. But this could work to his advantage in many works. And in particular, this works in two concertos where the orchestra is actually in the forefront, the Brahms Piano Concerto No. 2 and the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto No. 1. Now, I know that you might be surprised to hear me say that the Tchaikovsky concerto has the orchestra in the forefront because, the piano part has so many huge opportunities for virtuoso display. Those big unaccompanied sequences and the tumultuous octave passages and so on and so forth. But the orchestra does carry a lot of thematic importance in the Tchaikovsky, and you have lots of important first desk solos too. Also, the music's balletic nature, especially in the central movements, prestissimo, that depends very heavily on the conductor's tempo choice. And here, the piano flourishes, as brilliant as they are, basically serve as window dressing to the orchestral melodies. The Brahms second piano concerto is so symphonic in its nature and structure that it's crucial to have both an excellent soloist and an excellent conductor and orchestra involved. And, of course, you need an excellent cello soloist for the slow movement, and you need a great first desk horn soloist for the concerto's very opening. So, what does all this have to do with Geza Anda? Well, although he did make studio recordings of the Brahms and Tchaikovsky concertos, the ICA Classics label issued live broadcast performances with Geza Anda and the West German Radio Orchestra of Cologne in both the Tchaikovsky first and the Brahms second. And I personally think that these performances are far more dynamic and exciting and emotionally involved than their studio counterparts. The Tchaikovsky concerto performance dates from June 2nd, 1958. I'm looking at my disc here. I'm looking at the booklet notes. Yes, June 2nd, 1958. And George Schulte is conducting. Maybe you know Schulte's really excellent recording of the Tchaikovsky concerto from around the same time when he was supporting the piano soloist Clifford Curzon. I think that was with the Vienna Philharmonic on Decca. Also, Schulte recorded the Tchaikovsky again in the 1980s in Chicago with Andras Schiff at the piano. That's a less convincing, although very interesting, recording. However, the rhythmic precision and physicality that typified Schulte's work as a concerto accompanist in the 1950s is really palpable here in this Tchaikovsky concerto with Geza Anda. I would say that he lights a big fire under Geza throughout the concerto, and the pianist really lets go and he really tears into the virtuoso writing. But he also shapes the lyrical passages with appropriate eloquence and repose. You can say the same about Geza and the Brahms Second Concerto. He makes this very craggy and thick piano writing sound easy, but without any compromise in forcefulness or forward momentum. And if you listen to this ICA recording, you will notice the lightness and the delicacy and the pointed humor that he brings to the finale. I think it's his most convincing performance of this movement. This performance from April 5th, 1954, shows the conductor Otto Klemperer at the start of his so-called Indian summer. This was around the time when he began recording with the Philharmonia Orchestra in London, embarking on this amazing series of orchestral recordings that, that's a whole other topic. And with Klemperer, you get his firm tempos, you get well-thought-out tempo relationships, and you get woodwinds very much in the foreground in the balance. But he is an absolute firebrand here, and he's faster than you would expect. We usually think of Otto Klemperer as a slow and granitic and monumental conductor, but he could often surprise you, and especially in the early 1950s. In fact, each movement in this performance times out slightly less than in the Geza und Ferenc Frickscheu recording of this work. For example, here, the first movement times out to 16 minutes and 19 seconds, but in the Frickscheu Deutsche Grammophon recording, it's 18 minutes and 42 seconds. And actually, Geza remake with Herbert von Karajan, also on Deutsche Grammophon, was 17 minutes and 35 seconds, kind of splitting the difference. For me, the highlight of this live Klemperer Geza Brahms Second is the scherzo movement, the second movement. And you really hear the soloist and conductor interact in a combative way, and you do have these moments of lyrical respite. But it's really, really a battle, and it's quite exciting. Now, the sound quality is not as good as in either of the Geza studio Brahms seconds for Deutsche Grammophon. But the sense of occasion and the elemental intensity that come through with Klemperer at the podium, I think add up to a more gratifying listening and artistic experience, at least for me. So if you are interested in Geza and if you are a piano maven, you really should be interested in Geza definitely check out this ICA disc with the Tchaikovsky First and Brahms Second Concertos. This is Jed Disler, and thank you for listening to The Piano Maven, your friendly podcast guide to piano recordings. Until next time, stay well and stay safe.